It's 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi's Quarantini Happy Hour. Woohoo! Today, featuring viewer questions and some answers. And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience. Put this stuff away and say hello to the gang in the chat room. And there they are. We've got Ian, let's go to the top of the list. There we go. Martin Gravel, Ian Shortle, Darren Moss, Giovanni Lanza. It's the same people over and over again. My goodness. Dan Weber, Jesse J. Peck. Small audience today. Mark Rail, Jim Stamper, hey, Giovanni Lanza. They're piling in now that the big alert has gone out. Aaron Northern, hello. Alex Dillon, hello. I see that Darren's got a cue card written for me up there. Thanks, Darren. Dan Weber, Bob Gunnerfeld, Peter Rayhill. Yes, fourth like. Hit that like button, you guys. Come on. If you're not a subscriber yet, hit that red subscribe button as well. Kristen Knight, Akira Canyon, Andre Stepanian. How are you guys? Good to see you. Good to see your names in the thing. Hello, Bonzo. How are you? So I printed out a few questions from various places. One from an email, one from Aaron Northern posted in the comment section. I really appreciate the posts in the comment section because it gives me stuff to talk about on the big show. Hello, Michael McGraw, John Pearson, Ronald Schultz. What did I want to tell you guys? Oh, I know what it is. I figured out why the squirrel likes to sit in the backyard, get up on his haunches, and looks in the window. I don't think he sees me. I think he sees a reflection of himself. So apparently it's a squirrel that just loves the way he looks. Oh, man. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Ronald Schultz, John Hope, Lagrange Music, Earl Jordan. Hello. All right, so I want to bang right into these things. This one I picked up from the forum, and I didn't put down whose name this came from. I just copied and pasted. Hello, Paul Rickert. It says, I have a track that could fit two listings, one being exclusive and the other one not being exclusive, presumably. Should I wait to submit to the non-exclusive one until the exclusive has answered, if you know what I mean? And the answer to that is hell no. Submit to as many listings as you want. Same piece of music can go out to several listings. Don't wait for an answer. Think of it this way. They're like seeds. Cast them out in your garden in as many places as you can. And whichever one sprouts first, meaning whichever company reaches out to you first, would be the first one that I would consider. But no, you can absolutely submit to more than one at a time. Mystery person whose name I didn't put down. I'm looking at this. I didn't put down a lot of names, actually. So there's the answer on that. The squirrel's name is Narcissus. Now, that's funny. I wish his name was Relocated. Oh, man. Hello, Spiritual. How are you? So the next question I've got is from Aaron Northern. Hello, Aaron Northern. And Aaron asked a question in the comments, which is, Michael, question on sync fees. How are they usually paid out once a deal is agreed on? Okay, there's a follow-up. So it's not so well. I think that Aaron means once the deal is agreed on between the show or the production company, and they've decided to use your piece of music, how is that paid? Well, I don't know that there's an exact answer to that is uniform across the industry, but I do know that I hear let's call them comments from friends of mine that own music libraries, telling me that they often wait for months, like maybe up to 9 months, before that stuff is paid. It's not like, let's say, Aaron, that you submitted a track to Taxi, it got forwarded to a library put it in their catalog, and 30 days later, by a stroke of good fortune, a show reached out to the library and said, what do you have? Songs about romantic love. And your song was one of several that the library sent over to the show. And yours got picked. And they say, great, we're going to put that in the show. Do they cut a check right then and there and send it to the library? Usually not. It may happen on rare occasions, but from what I've heard anecdotally from friends of mine that own libraries, is they invoice for that. And those invoices will go, first they have to go through, first the show has to air, I believe, because they want to make sure that it's actually gone in there. And then it goes to the accounting department, and first it would go to probably the producer of the show, the executive producer, the music supervisor. They want to see a cue sheet, and then it goes to accounting, and that's where the delay happens. It will lay there like a lox in accounting. I know that many of the companies, the networks and production companies, pay quarterly. Otherwise, they'd be sending checks every day all over the place. So I think that they kind of batch them up. It may not always be like that. JP is answering. My experience after airing, it took 3 months for Netflix to wire dollars to my sync agent, and then another 2 weeks before I received it. So there you go. It's rarely immediate. It really depends on the accounting practices and the payable department at whatever the network is or the production company before you're going to see that money. So, right, accounting, then to producers for signatures. Yeah, everybody's got to sign off. ABC sent it to the library, and I received it in 4 months. So, yeah, probably because the library got it a month before their next accounting period, which was the next quarter. So there is no exact answer to that other than it would be extremely rare, if not impossible, to find out that your song is going to be used in a show next week, and they send a check right over to the library, and the library sends a check right over to you. So the bottom line is, Aaron, if you're looking to buy a house or a car and you're waiting for a check, I wouldn't sit by the phone, okay, or the mailbox, as it were. And the follow-up is also from Aaron. What happens with them if the scene your music is in gets cut out? That's why they wait till the show is finalized, and probably when it airs, or at least totally in the can, because yes, scenes do get cut out. And I mean, it's not something that happens a lot, but it does happen where somebody gets word that a piece of their music is going to end up in a scene, and then the scene does get cut. Yeah, Dan Weber interjects, overseas can take much longer. Absolutely. Well, overseas can take a lot longer, both for sync fees and even more so, because the sync fee doesn't go through ASCAP or BMI or CSAC or anybody's PRO, but the performing rights royalties, performance royalties, let's say that you've got a show that airs in Australia. So it's got to go through the Australian PRO, which then has an affiliate relationship probably with both ASCAP and BMI, I think. And then so it goes from their accounting, which could easily take a quarter, if not 2 quarters. Then it's got to go to the U.S. PRO, and it's going to go through a quarter. So correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think it's not unusual for it to take as much as a year. I've heard even a year and a half before stuff showed up from a PRO. for performance royalties from overseas. It probably also depends on the country. I mean, if it's like if it were a tiny little country, I'm trying to think of a tiny little country, but Liechtenstein. I'm guessing that Liechtenstein may very well have a PRO, and actually, because it's a tiny little country, maybe they have tiny little accounting issues, so maybe it does get out the door faster. I don't know, but it's they might as well put it on a raft with a little bitty sail and just shove it out in the ocean. It might get here faster. Let's see. Slow boat to China. Yeah, basically, that's the drill. Is there any way to know if the sync fee split told you is really correct? Aaron, I'm assuming that you mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, that let's say you've got a 50-50 sync fee split deal with your library, and they tell you that it was $3,500 was the sync fee that they got, therefore you would get $1,750 US dollars. Is it possible that they got 5,000 and they're telling you that it's 3,500? I guess that's possible. I've never actually heard from anybody in 28 years of doing this that anybody ever found that to be the case. How about you guys that have had experience? Yeah, JP says a year to 18 months for foreign, so there you go. Monaco is tiny. Yes, it is. Grand Fenwick. Is that a country? I don't know. But yeah, Monaco is tiny. Andre's saying that he's waited as long as a year to get paid, and then it's every 3 months, quarterly or regularly. So I'm assuming that Andre's talking about performance money. Wow, Jim Stamper waited for 3 years from an English broadcast. Probably because they couldn't understand an American accent when they were talking to the PRO in the States. Damn Yankees. Wow, it's a long time. But it happens, we had that was a different scenario. We had one case that was 7 years, I believe, from the time somebody was forwarded to a library until they made their first penny on a particular submission. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I know there was something that took 7 years. Luxembourg is tiny. There you go. Is the chat working? Yeah, it's working for me. And you know what? On occasion, I don't know how often this happens, but it does happen, where you get word from the library that your piece of music is in episode 105 of a certain series, TV series, and then you don't get anything, you don't get anything, you don't get anything. It could be something as simple as the person that is filling out the cue sheets forgot to add you to the cue sheet. But see, that's why libraries get what they get. Is it's really their job to chase it down. Sometimes you may have to alert the library. Maybe they overlooked it and it also got overlooked by the person filling out the cue sheet. Maybe the cue sheets never got submitted for a particular episode. There are a lot of little things that can go wrong. It doesn't happen often, but it's also not rare. And I have definitely heard of instances where composers or songwriters that I know have had to reach out to ASCAP or BMI and say, can you go track down this money? And there have been cases where they've actually had to send over a clip of the scene, showing that it was in the show. And then the PRO will work with the library and the network or the production company to make sure that you get paid. Wow, the chat is freezing. Well, somebody should warm it up. Aaron Northern says, it's not scrolling for me. It's working fine on this end. Don't know what to tell you. Jesse says his live chat isn't running. Well, if it was running, you'd have to go catch it. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. It seems to be working fine here. We've had this issue on occasion before, but it was actually, I think, for Liz and I that it wasn't scrolling. I would say log out, log back in. A lot of people are saying it's locked up. Yeah, I would. Interesting. Andre's saying he can't see other chats updated, stuck on my own answer. All good now. Okay. Yeah, I would just say refresh. Whoa, there we go. All I'm getting all kinds of stuff flying by now. Stopped at 4 minutes and 7 seconds. Yeah, I'm just seeing all kinds of stuff. Ian Shortle says, make sure you're in the live chat and not the top chat. Chat not working here from Dean Turner. Ditto. Darren Moss says, all good now. Can this be seen? Yes, it can, Jesse. I see you. I'm like Miss Francis on Romper Room. I've got to get myself to go along with my classy audience sound effects. I should get the Romper Room mirror. Or any of you old enough to remember Romper Room with Miss Francis, and she would hold up the magic mirror and say, I can see Timmy, and I can see Bobby, and I can see Janice. That's funny. Now it's stopped at Jesse's post saying, can this be seen? Somebody else type something. It just could be one of those, there we go, appears to be stuck, started working now. I'm guessing that this is a YouTube issue because I don't think that, all we do is present a link to the chat when we make the episode live. It's not like I've got squirrels, which I have plenty of, running in a little wheel driving the engine on the chat. Jan Weilage says no chat. Popping out the chat worked for Il Raso. John Hope refreshed and says it's okay now. Well, this is making for some very interesting content for today's episode. Let's chat about the chat. Hold on. Let's chat about the chat. Okay. Anyway, I want to get this chat thing straightened out. Mine to stop too. Frozen again. Frozen here. Looks like a YouTube glitch. Yeah. It's... they're probably short on funds over there, and they just don't have enough staff to make the chat work. Oh, man. Okay, so here's the next question. I know you've spoken about this on Taxi TV before, but I can't remember what you said. That makes two of us. And now I can't find the episode. I have that problem as well. Is it okay to sign a deal with the music library for a song of mine if they don't offer any money up front? That's an interesting question. That's a personal and a business decision that only you can make. But here's how I would make that decision if I were you. I mean, some libraries will offer money up front. It could range from $100 to $200. Back in the day, a few years ago or several years ago, they used to pay like $1,000 a track, but that's pretty much long gone. Or per song, I mean. I also know some really top-notch A-list libraries that I have tremendous respect for the people who run them, the way they do business. Their reputations are spectacularly good. And they get ownership of the copyright and ownership of the master recording, and they don't pay anything up front. However, they're really picky about what they sign, and they only sign music that they feel pretty confident that they can get placed in shows. And so I would say that the probability of you getting in a show goes up by being in a catalog like that. then again, I've got to figure that libraries that do pay something up front have made that investment, so they too are motivated to recoup that investment. Um, but sometimes, I would say oftentimes, more often than not, library, oh, there's the squirrel, right on cue. What time is it? 4:20. I should start writing down the time that the squirrel shows up. Um, so when a library pays you up front to buy out the publishing and the master, they typically don't split the sync fee. Libraries that you grant the rights to the composition and the master recording up front that don't give you any money, most of the time do split the sync fees with you. So, you know, just get your music in. A lot of libraries do a lot of different kinds of deals. There is no like one size fits all deal that's kind of uniform across the entire industry. So there's that. John Pearson. Well, you guys can hear me. I don't know if you can type back to me or not, but for those of you guys who've had some placements or signed a lot of deals, is that your experience as well, that companies that pay up front don't split sync fees, but companies that don't pay up front do split the sync fees? And frankly, I would think that's the better deal, really, unless you just need money up front and you want to get some cash in hand now. But I'd rather get half the sync fee, especially, like shows that I would say $3,500 is a pretty common number when they license a song for like an hour-long dramatic TV show. 420 squirrel spotting. What's he smoking? Not much. He's digging in the yard. I don't know why, but oh man, still having problems with the chat room today. I hate it when stuff doesn't work. And it scares me. I hope stuff like this doesn't happen during the road rally, because this is something that we can't fix. Okay. Anyway, onward. So yes, to answer your question, it is okay to sign a deal with no money up front, but I would make sure that you get half of the sync fee. That seems equitable to me. Here's another one. I don't know why I didn't put the names on these. What's the deal with using loops if I'm submitting to film and television listings? Can I use audio loops or not? And the answer to that is depends where the loops came from, depends on the license from the entity that you got the loops from. But I would say oftentimes you can use the loops. Here's the rub. And we've talked about this fairly recently. That damn squirrel's just sitting there looking right in this window. There he is up on his haunches. So I got to start working with the curtain shut. This is distracting. So yes, you can use loops. The problem is if you don't adulterate the loop in some form of fashion, and it could be, you should do it to almost every loop, whether it's a keyboard loop, whether it's a drum loop, whatever it is. If somebody asks you to do stems and one of the stems happens to be a loop that is unadulterated, that's where the problem comes in, because now you've taken somebody else's sole creation, handed that off as a stem to the library, and if the library gives stems to the editor or the music supervisor working on the show, and they happen to use that unadulterated stem, you would get paid for work that you did create. But if you take an existing loop and change the beat a little bit or alter the sound, hopefully it's a MIDI driven loop that you can alter the notes, then you're good to go. By the way, El Raso, I did check out Discord. It's the problem being, and it looked good. The problem with using other chats is you can't just go to discord.com/taxi and boom, you're in. It's a process. As a matter of fact, they've got tutorials to teach you the process. And what scares me is 3 years ago at the Road Rally, we were giving away prizes in the Grand Ballroom. We would ask people, where's my phone? I've got to have a visual aid for this. Yes, I did a quick squirrel check there. And we said to everybody, okay, the first person to live tweet starting now wins the acoustic guitar. And we had so many people. I would say a majority of people, like 50, 60, 70% of the people in the ballroom were really up in arms about this. We thought everybody, we told people this was going to happen before the convention. And we thought everybody pretty much knows how to get the Twitter app on their phone, sign up for a Twitter account. That wasn't true. A lot of people, it's like, well, how do I get the Twitter on my phone? So the level of tech expertise amongst Road Rally attendees was not that great that year, number one. And number two, to compound the issue, the bandwidth, the Wi-Fi in the ballroom sucked. So people that had Twitter couldn't access it because they couldn't get a signal in the ballroom. So is it too early to tweet for the next rally? Why, yes, Brad, it is. Oh, look, somebody's tweeting me. Yikes. Liz says she's no longer seeing the live chat, so I apologize if I missed something. Okay, Liz says okay for her now. Anyway, all right, well, we're just going to have to suck it up. We've only got 33 minutes left in the show, so just suffer through it, you guys. Let's do another question. Might be hard. Chat is okay. All right. Yeah, I'm guessing it was probably a server meltdown, and they were probably switching over to another server or something like that. Oh boy, a mixing question. Yay! Can you please explain why I should use mix bus compression if I've already put a compressor on all of my tracks that I thought needed it? That's a really good question. Frankly, I can remember the first time I heard about people using a mix bus compressor and going, because that wasn't all that common, quite frankly, in the 70s when I first started out. There weren't that many stereo compressors. There were sometimes like Uri or Universal LA3s had a switch on the back. I think DBX 160s did as well, the old 160s with the meter, where you could have two of them together and you could have a jumper wire that went from unit 1 to unit 2, and then you could flick a switch that would make them stereo. So, because prior to SSLs, and I could be wrong about this, but I think I'm right, prior to SSLs coming out with a stereo mix bus compressor built in, it just wasn't common in a lot of the better consoles that were out there. Even a lot of the classic Neves didn't have it. It wasn't until, I forget what the model of Neve was, probably like an 8108 or something like that, did stereo mix bus compressors start showing up. So really, the compression was added to each individual track as needed, like salt and pepper. And then you got overall compression added during the mastering process. But once mix bus compressors started showing up and engineers would get their mix together, here's the tricky part. So you get your mix together and then you press that magic button and you hit it and set it like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio. And generally speaking, you don't want to set it at like 4, 5, 6, 7-to-1. That would squash it too much. Although with today's pop music, people may go that high. So the issue then becomes, now that you've got it running through the mix bus compressor, what it does is it adds what they call glue. I've never personally thought that was the greatest word in the world for it, but it just gives it this like 10% better sound. It's, people often say, my mixes don't sound like a record. Well, if you had an SSL with a mix bus compressor and you press that button, it would get closer to sounding like a record right then and there in the control room. So everybody fell in love with mix bus compressors probably starting around 1982, 83, 84, somewhere around there when SSL started becoming very popular. So once you've got that button depressed and everything sounds really slick and sexy, but then you realize that the vocal's not quite loud enough. Do you disengage the mix bus compressor and adjust the vocal and then re-engage the mix bus compressor to see how your louder vocal now sounds with the mix bus compression in? Or do you leave the mix bus compression in and make the adjustment while it's already in? I know people that make the, mix bus compressor compresses the whole mix at once. But it's only compressing, the stuff that's peaky within the mix. I personally like mixes with a lot more dynamics. I really do. But that's because I'm old school, and that's the way, that's the stuff that I worked on and listened to back in the day. It just didn't have a lot of compression on the mixes. If you got any, it was done in the mastering phase, and it wasn't a lot even then. So it's really a matter of taste and workflow and your own personal preferences. This may turn into a 2-hour Quarantini happy hour. Ronald Schultz, I'm going to go back to your question in a moment. So, I would say the best thing you can do is just experiment. But you will find that it doesn't have to be expensive. From what I understand, there are a lot of software stereo mix bus compressors or stereo compressors that can be used on the mix bus that sound quite good, and they do add that glue. So it's my personal preference at this point, but I'm just starting to learn to use Logic and all the great stuff that comes with it. Who knows? Maybe 6 months after the Road Rally, I will be the world's biggest fan of using mix bus compression on everything I do. Who knows? Let me go back to that question from Ronald Schultz. Logic Pro X mix question. Generally speaking, where should the master control be set at? Is that an ear thing for the piece you are mixing? Are you talking master volume control or master level? Master, like your 2 mix out. Personally, just from my own experience growing up in the analog world, and learning gain structures and stuff back then, we always set the master fader at 0. Just that simple. Set it at 0. And if you're seeing too much on your 2 mix meters, you could pull down your master fader so you're not driving the output. But if you've got too many faders that are hot, if you're playing Chase the Fader, which is a very popular game in the studio, where everything is groovy and you like all your levels on the mix side, and then you bring up the bass and the kick because you want a little more bottom end in the mix. Once you do that, you go take a little lunch break and you come back and you listen to it and go, wow, the bottom end sounds really good, but now that guitar part that I love so much is kind of missing. So you bring up the guitar, and then once you do that, you go, oh, shoot, man, now the vocal's not loud enough. So you bring up the vocal, and before you know it, you're overdriving the bus. And think of, how do you explain a bus? I saw a tutorial the other day where the guy said, think of it as like a yellow school bus, and you put stuff in it, and it goes from point A to point B. I didn't love that explanation personally. But I've also seen the inside of a lot of recording consoles in my time, and I know what a bus looks like from a hardwired perspective. So basically, if you have a 24-channel console with 24 buses, that really means you could think of it as 24 wires that all go to stereo left output and stereo right output. Okay, so if you've got all those things, imagine they're like railroad tracks, okay? Or lanes on a highway. So all your different signals are going down lanes on that highway, and the final destination is where they're all combined to the stereo out. Far left, far right, or anywhere in between. Is that a good explanation, you guys? Does that make sense? Just for info, I'm not seeing any boxes. I don't know what you're talking about there. Yeah, it's a wire that brings a signal from point A to point B. Now, nowadays, buses are done with software. There's really not a wire. It's all going on via software inside of chips. And frankly, once consoles were no longer like discrete hardwired consoles like they made back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, once consoles with channel strips started coming out, let me find a visual aid. Okay, so let's say that this is a side view. Oh, look, I can go outside now. A side view of a channel strip. Up here is the fader and all the little control knobs. Down here are connectors on the printed circuit board. And, you would have, let's say, 24 connectors, each one representing bus 1, bus 2, bus 3, bus 4, etc. All those, when you shove that channel strip down into the belly pan of the console, they go into other connectors, female connectors. This is a male connector. Do I need to explain why? Hopefully not. And this is the female connector. And they couple together like that, and that's how the signal goes from the channel strip into a giant motherboard, which is basically a giant printed circuit board that sits in the belly pan of the console, and that replaced wires. Back in the early days, they actually would have bundles of wires that would go to connectors for each channel. But then somebody got smart and decided to put it all, I think, on 24 volts and built it into the PC boards. So you snap stuff in and snapped it out. So there you go. There's a little console stuff. I'm catching up on the chat for those of you who are watching the show later and wondering why is the host of the show staring. It's because I'm reading what they're talking about in the chat. There's another interesting thing that I'm starting to learn and understand now that I've got Logic. And believe me, I've just started playing with Logic. I've probably got like 2 hours in total of playing around with it. So if you don't understand the concept of sends and returns, an aux bus, a send is on consoles like an SSL, they'll have sends 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and some of them are stereo, some of them are mono. For the sake of this explanation, let's just say they're all mono. So if you've got a guitar on track 16 and you want to send that guitar signal to a reverb device, let's say you're sending it to a live chamber, because I used to have a couple and I know how to use them. They're not that hard, trust me. You would then send one, and you would assign that send to go to the left side of the echo chambers, and send 2 would go to the right side of the echo chambers. So remember, we're not working with like a stereo send. We're working back in the old days with mono sends, and you would balance out how much that guitar would go to the left chamber, how much would go to the right chamber. But once it goes to the chamber and comes out through a speaker, gets picked up by a microphone, where does the signal from the microphone go? Why, it would come back to the console to what we called returns. And most consoles back in the day would have probably 6 returns. Basically, a return is kind of like a mini channel strip. It's a place for that signal to come back to. Could be a slapback, a delay signal. It could be a reverb signal. Nowadays, it's like infinite channels on something like Logic or any of the DAWs. So you can bring those signals back from your reverb device into a pair of faders. I haven't even looked to see, quite frankly. I'm sure you Logic guys can tell me. Does Logic have dedicated returns built into it somewhere? Andre says, in digital recording, another reason buses are important is to save CPU. That's exactly where I was going. Okay, so now, that's great that you brought that up, because that's exactly where I was going with this. So now let's say that you want to put reverb on the first electric guitar, on the second electric guitar, the same reverb. First electric guitar, second electric guitar, the third electric guitar, the lead vocal, the background vocals, the keyboard. You want reverb on a lot of stuff. Well, if you assign a plug-in to each one of those channels, every time you put a plug-in to work on each of those channels, you are making the CPU, the central processing unit, on your computer work hard, or harder. With every one you use, each one of those makes the computer's brain work harder. So let's say that you've got the same reverb going on 10 different channel strips for 10 different instruments. That means your computer is doing 10 times the processing. Or you could just merely put it on a stereo send. Let's say send 1 is a stereo send with a pan pot, so you can decide how much of it goes to the left side of the reverb, how much goes to the right side of the reverb. That way you can crank up how much signal you want from each of those 10 channels to go on a bus. Remember, a bus is like a train track or a freeway, couple of lanes, going to the reverb device. So now you're only using one bit of processing for that particular reverb. Now, if you added, a delay to those things, you could do the same thing as long as you wanted the same delay and everything. So anytime you want the same reverb or whatever the effect is on multiple things, it doesn't make good sense as far as using the processing power of your computer to add it separately to each channel. Much better off putting it on a bus and a send and just sending the amount you want from that channel. They all go on those little train tracks down to the echo chambers, and then the echo chamber either feeds back to dedicated returns or dedicated faders, which would be panned left and right for stereo. Just memorize your mixer signal flow diagram. Yeah. It is huge on the CPU. Michael, how do you fix chase the fader? You mean chasing levels where everything keeps getting louder and louder? Oh yeah, maybe I didn't address that completely before. I'm glad you asked that follow-up. One way is to sit there and just bring everything down, and back in the early days, that's what we used to do. Sometimes we would use a pencil and put it on a bunch of faders and bring them down equally. Sometimes you lay your hand across 4 faders at a time, and 4-finger it, and just do that, bring them back. What you don't want to do is keep pushing those faders up, playing chase the fader, and then bring down your master fader, because you are, what's the opposite of optimizing? Whatever the opposite of optimizing is, when you're bringing down your master fader to combat the overage of signal being sent down those buses, the tracks to the stereo output, you're getting your gain structure out of whack, and it just can't be good. You will actually notice, I do remember times that I really loved some of the sounds that I had on drums, for instance, and I would I'd pull down the master before I knew this stuff really well. I would pull down the master fader to compensate for me playing chase the fader and bringing the drums up and up and up and up. And then I would notice the drums don't sound as good anymore. So there's something to be said for unity gain. And frankly, I'm not technical enough probably to explain unity gain. You would think unity gain is a 0 level mic signal in with your mic preset at unity gain, wherever that is on your mic pre, and then your input fader, if you have an input fader in the signal flow, which certainly like SSLs and Neves have. So you would have a mic pre, which is usually a knob way up there, and then you would have an input fader down below, which was controlled by a voltage controlled amplifier, commonly known as a VCA. And where the hell was I going with this? Oh, so if you set everything at 0, set your mix fader at 0, your input fader at 0, and your master mix, stereo mix out at 0. And then you send a tone in, you would send it actually into a line input, and then turn up your preamp knob. That's where you would find where your 0 position is on the preamp knob if it wasn't already marked, which I don't remember if they were marked on the SSLs or not. They may have had, like visual markings, but without numbers. I don't remember, honestly. But that's a perfect world where everything is at 0. It's like a car engine. Think of it as a car engine that cruises really nicely and gas efficiently at 70 miles an hour. And if you accelerate, it makes the engine work harder. And if you decelerate, the engine works less harder. So having everything at zeros is the optimal starting point. Ronan Chris Murphy and Fett can both give you better explanations of what unity gain is. And I've actually listened. I mean, if you go on YouTube, I think you can Google Ronan Chris Murphy talking about unity gain. But I know he and I have talked about it. And frankly, I just sat there going, yes, nodding in agreement. I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. I just know, push the stuff up to 0, make it happy. No, squirrel's gone. The squirrel departed. My distraction is over. Wow, it's 4:48. Man, get me talking about audio stuff, huh? Okay. So hopefully I answered that. And one last question for today, which is, do music library owners ever reach out to ask if you can change or alter something in a particular track? And if they do, then will they sign it? It's kind of a tough question to answer. If a library owner hears something that you've sent and it sounds very usable, very syncable, when they hear cha-ching, when they hear your track, and they think they can make money with it, but let's say the vocal was too loud in the mix. Will they reach out to you and say, I will sign this track in a minute. I think I can get a lot of placements with it over time. Can you please remix it and bring the vocal back a couple of dB? Yeah, I think that happens quite often. The more complex the alterations are, the less likely they're going to ask you to do that. If they have to give you notes, like bring the vocal back, bring the background vocals up, add a pre-chorus before every chorus. Can you change the bridge? I don't like the ascending bridge. I'd like a descending bridge. If they've got to put that much thought into what they're going to ask you for, they're probably not going to do it. Another thing is, if it's something that's not incredibly unique or not incredibly desirable, as in, I think I can make a lot of money with this, says the library owner, and I don't have anything else like it in my catalog, then their willingness to ask for those changes and patiently wait for them to be made are more likely to happen. However, let's say that you've got a dramedy queue that's a fairly vanilla but very usable dramedy queue, and they've already got 21 other dramedy queues in their catalog. Are they going to spend a lot of brain power or time or back and forth communication with you to get you to tweak your dramedy queue? Nope, probably not. They don't need it that badly. And people often talk about, am I competing against other taxi members? Not on your way out the door. Once you get to the library owner and you've been forwarded along with 7 other dramedy queues, if the first one they hear is yours and it needs some surgery done on it, they're probably going to put it in the maybe pile and continue listening. And if they hear 2 or 3 or 4 other ones that are all very usable, then yours falls out of contention because it needs some surgery. If, however, they're kind of desperate to find some new, fresh dramedy cues because they don't have many, or what they have might sound dated, like a dramedy cue would have sounded 7 years ago, then they're going to be more likely to ask you for those changes. And if they give you a timeline, that probably means there's a particular show that they want to pitch it for. And if they say, can you get this back to me by tomorrow with these changes, you have a golden opportunity to impress them by getting it to them no later than the deadline, but frankly, you'd be really wise to get it to them a few hours before the deadline so that they go, wow, this guy's on the job, on the case, on the ball, on lots of things. Probably on the contract that they send you. Right. Jim Stamper says sometimes they ask for changes and they still don't sign it. So you say thanks, maybe next time. It's about the long game. Absolutely right. In the scenario where they ask you for the changes and then they don't sign it, they didn't like the change. Maybe they thought whatever change they were prescribing was going to be the magic bullet that really changed it. And then when they heard it, they went, not so much. It's their prerogative, and you can be a little ticked off that they made you jump through that hoop, but actually it's probably a great opportunity to look at it as a life lesson. It's like, wow, I learned something today about my mix from a library owner from a different perspective than my own. So there you go, you learned something. Wow, Cass went back and forth on a mix for a library. It took a month of going back and forth. Wow, they must have really wanted that track. Russell, where are you talking about noise floors? I love a noisy floor. It's funny, noise floor and various forms of inherent noise in the recording chain, in the signal chain, which was much more of a discussion back in my day. We had to worry more about headroom. We had to worry more about just the noise. I mean, when you bought a microphone, there were a lot of microphones that sounded great, but man, if you weren't hitting them with a good, healthy signal, but not overdriving them, if your preamp wasn't optimally, adjusted for that microphone and the amount of level coming off that mic, you would get noise. And because it was an analog world and every track added a little tape hiss, and you're adding the inherent hiss that comes off of the voltage controlled amplifiers in each of the channel strips. The more channels you use, the more noise you use. Well, nowadays in a digital domain, you're not passing analog signal through your recording software. Maybe analog on the way in, but once it gets there, or obviously actually once it goes through the interface, it gets digitized. turns into zeros and ones. So the zeros and ones are going down the wire, and they don't have inherent noise. They will only have inherent noise if whatever the sound source is has inherent noise. But by using more and more channels, you're not adding more electronics in the analog domain and causing more of a noise floor. So there's our discussion about noise floor. Ilrasso says, Michael, is because Darren asked at which level the vocal recording input in the DAW was. Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, dither functions on plugins can certainly cause noise. You know, back when digital first started to become a thing, I remember Sony sent me a 2-track digital recorder. It was one of the first, and it used a 3/4-inch video cassette. I can't remember the name of the device, but it was like the size of a small suitcase. You know, it was like yay tall, yay wide. Ooh, color change there. And they actually, I'm sure digital devices have dither adjustments now that you probably do all in a software thing. This thing actually had dither adjustments that you had to adjust with a tweaker. You know, do you know what a tweaker is? A tweaker is a small screwdriver that usually says like Sony or Neve or SSL. It doesn't have to say any of those, but they give them out at AES conventions. And you know you're a techie when you carry a tweaker around in your pocket protector, actually. Then you're really a techie then. I still have a tweaker sitting out in my garage that says either Sony or MCI or SSL on it from the good old days. Yes, the next Quarantini is on Friday. I'm not doing one tomorrow. I actually made some decent road rally progress today, but tomorrow I've got to drink 5 cups of coffee, try not to have a heart attack after doing that, and just power through a bunch of road rally stuff. Darren Moss, I'd love to discuss what input recording level each instrument should be into the DAW. That is the level I am at. It's all contingent on the dynamics. Well, whatever the sound source is, you know, let's face it, a tambourine, you know, you're probably better off seeing practically nothing on the meter. And of course, I do come from a world of VU meters that had needles, you know. I still prefer, maybe I'll get used to digital meters, but I've been around them now for many, many years. I do not love digital peak reading meters. I just don't. I like old analog meters, but I knew what they sounded like, if you know what I mean. Like, I knew on any particular instrument. And was I using Ampex tape? Was I using Scotch tape? And I don't mean the kind that you do Christmas presents with, but Scotch actually made tape, 3M. Were you, recording it at +6 levels or +3 levels? Were you going through Dolby multitrack? Did I say this already? 15 IPS or 30 IPS? All those things came into how you treated instruments. It's funny, all the stuff I never thought about then, but apparently I must have learned it somewhere. You would learn about this stuff, and it would become habit that you wouldn't even think about. But for instance, if you were recording at +3 levels, meaning +3 over 0. So you would set your input tone beep, like a 1K tone at 0, coming into the tape machine, coming into the console. And then you would adjust all your inputs so that they came up to 0. And then you would adjust your outputs so they came up to 0. That way you knew everything was uniform, no matter which day you worked, no matter which tape you put up, no matter which studio you took it to, all those adjustments would be made. So if you are at +3, that means that you're actually +3 dBs over 0. So that wasn't a lot of level, and it left you plenty of headroom, which if you're running a multi-track tape, a 2-inch multi-track at 15 inches per second, that means more of the tape, because it's going slowly, more of the tape is in contact with the head longer because of the slower speed. Got it? So if you were to record +6, which didn't leave you a lot of headroom, at 15 IPS, which nobody really did, and somebody whacked the crap out of a snare drum, then it's just going to send this giant burst of signal, which turns into a magnetic pulse, which saturates the tape. With the tape going slowly and the levels jacked up, that would cause distortion, and not the good kind, okay? So if you're recording at 30 inches per second, the tape makes contact with the head for less time because it's traveling twice as fast, and you've got your levels jacked up to +6, so you could get away with more. All right? Those things aren't even a consideration today. But you do have to worry about, digital stuff crapping out. That's something I noticed the other night when I was playing around making a little masterpiece of mine in Logic. It's really easy to crap stuff out in the digital domain. What is dither? Dither is somebody who's not very smart. Duh. Dither is, I probably can't explain this very well, but dither is basically this inherent low-level noise in the digital domain that's way down there. It has something to do with the zeros and ones, but I don't know what. Remember, I am a child of the analog generation. Did I ever work with Quadraphonics era? No. Quadraphonics recording consoles, I was aware of them. I actually had, a cardboard cutout thing. Like when you buy those toys, they're like die cut into a piece of cardboard and you fold them all up and it becomes a three-dimensional thing. Somebody once gave me, I probably got it at an AES show or something, a Quadraphonics console that was like that, where it came in the mail, between two pieces of corrugated cardboard. You open it up and the console was printed on it in beautiful 4-color, and then you punched it out, and then folded it up. And look, you had a little miniature quadraphonic console, and then you would put that in your control room, and all the acts would come in and go, "What is that?" "Oh, that's a Quadraphonics console." "Oh, why don't you have one of those?" Because I've already got one sitting here. Anyway, so there you go. It's 5 o'clock. It's 5:02, so our time together has come to an end. I will see you guys not tomorrow, but I will be back here on Friday for another exciting episode of Taxi's Quarantini Happy Hour. Thanks for showing up, you guys. Good night, Giovanni. And yes, R.I.P. Helen Reddy and Mac Davis. Oh, man, I didn't know that. That's sad. Anyway. All right, bye, you guys. See you tomorrow. Sounds like it's time for a new battery.